Breaking news, a dramatic U.S.-led escalation in the Caribbean. What the Navy calls the largest warship ever built, along with fighter jets.
I think we're just going to kill people that are bringing drugs into our country. You know, they're going to be like dead.
A $13.2 billion aircraft carrier is making its way to Venezuelan waters, and it is not there just for show. Trump has ordered American troops to fight a quiet war and has deployed a small fleet of warships toward South America.
Sources tell CBS News senior military officials presented President Trump with options for potential military operations inside Venezuela.
A war not against Venezuela themselves, but against a sinister organization operating in its territories.
Or at least we've seen from this report, to begin using military force against these organizations. And you heard from Secretary Rubio, and they have a lot of weapons.
Some have called it an illegal attack, while others claim it is a justified response.
New warning from Venezuela's government saying that they are prepared for any attack from the United States.
Speaking to the imperialists of the North, we're getting ready, and we will fight if you dare set foot in Venezuela.
Tighten on move. While the U.S. has deployed its Navy to put pressure on countries in the past, the forces deployed this time around are a force to be reckoned with. There is the famed Iwo Jima Amphibious Ready Group, consisting of an aircraft carrier that isn't just huge but also swift. Being one of the deadliest ships in the U.S. Navy, it specializes in emergency and combat situations where jets and helicopters need to be deployed quickly. When the keel for the Iwo Jima was laid down in 1997, the builders knew they were creating a monster. The Iwo Jima is absolutely huge, with a length of 843 feet, longer than many skyscrapers. This is necessary to accommodate a longer runway, allowing aircraft to take off and land on the ship. But Iwo Jima is more than just a landing strip. It also functions as a control center, with 2D, 3D, and surface search radars on board alongside a target acquisition system. This beast finds potential targets, acting both as a command center and an aircraft carrier. Arming the vessel are 2 rolling airframe missiles and 2 Sea Sparrow launchers. Additionally, it is equipped with 2 20mm Phalanx CIW's automated weapon systems, 3 Mk-38 chain gun systems, as well as 450 Browning machine guns. With that many cutting-edge fighting units aboard, this thing is a moving fortress. But the real protection comes from the jets it carries. The USS Iwo Jima can carry 2 kinds of jets, the F-35B and the AV-8B Harrier II attack aircraft. Alongside that, it can also carry helicopter units, including the MV-22B Osprey, the AH-1WZ Super Cobra, the CH-53E Super Stallion, the UH-1Y Venom, and the SH-60F. In a matter of minutes, the Iwo Jima can deploy a whole fleet of fighter aircrafts to target incoming threats and destroy targets. And it's not like the Iwo Jima ever travels alone. Accompanying it at all times are the USS San Antonio and the USS Fort Lauderdale. Both battleships are designed for rapid reaction missions, making them a terror at sea. Combined, these 3 behemoths are carrying 4,500 sailors, including 2,200 Marines trained in amphibious assault. And all that brute force is teetering on Venezuelan territory, watching and waiting. But they are not alone. America has deployed even more assets in an attempt to intimidate Venezuela. Backing the Iwo Jima Amphibious Ready Group is Southcom's task force, consisting of 10 major warships. That includes the USS Jason Dunham, USS Gravely, and the USS Stockdale, all 3 of which are armed with heavy anti-air and anti-submarine capabilities, as well as Tomahawk land attack missiles. As if that wasn't enough, the U.S. has also deployed a nuclear-powered fast attack submarine. That's enough military might to do some serious damage to a country like Venezuela. But the big question on everyone's mind is why? Why is the U.S. doing this? What purpose does it achieve aside from instigating hostility? Well, the U.S. is not sending out its best warships for no reason. According to Trump himself, the country is at war, but not with Venezuela. Rather, it is a step forward in one of the most drawn-out and deadly wars the U.S. has been fighting for decades. I am, of course, talking about the war on drugs. And South America, well, that region is the hub for the global drug trade. And to understand why Venezuela has become such a major target that aircraft carriers are being launched into its territory, we have to first realize the role this small country plays in the global drug trade. Drugs in South America. South America has acted as the world's supplier of most major drugs. Whether it be cannabis, cocaine, or methamphetamine, countries like Colombia, Peru, and Bolivia, and as it so happens, Venezuela have all been major producers of these dangerous exports. And feeding off of this trade are cartels. These cartels are powerful, influential, and deadly. They have set up systems to not just grow, but also prepare, package, and ship these drugs to their distribution centers in the UK, the Middle East, and of course the United States. And the presence of these cartels creates other deadly crimes. Human trafficking, taking lives and disturbing public order, these gangs engage in all that and more. Now, this certainly isn't a new occurrence. Drugs have been a major problem coming out of South America since the 70s and the 80s. But what has changed in recent years is the response to this illegal business. Now the U.S. has put its foot down. Laws have become stricter, and the government is adamant about quashing the drug problem once and for all. The drug trade will no longer be tolerated, especially under the Trump administration. But even before Trump, the doors were closing in on these drug cartels. The United States government has adopted a tried-and-true policy to root out drug cartels and destroy drug production capabilities. The trick so far has been to work with the local government hand in hand to root out these cartels. And when it came to most of the South American countries, that approach has worked splendidly. Take Colombia, for example. This was a country so plagued with drug production and cartel activity that it was the playground for Pablo Escobar during his reign. But since the United States government began working with the Colombian authorities, the cartel activity and drug production have dropped significantly. Under the plan, Colombia developed by the U.S., Colombian security forces received military aid in the form of training and equipment. Both countries formed a joint task force to fight against the cartels. The U.S. also provided herbicides that were used extensively to kill off coca plants that are used to make cocaine. And all of it worked. Colombia's drug production dropped by 70% between 2001 and 2012. The same happened with countries like Mexico, Peru, and Bolivia. Joint task forces and a lot of U.S. money are helping combat drug cartels that had terrorized the locals for decades. But here is the thing. While all these countries were more than willing to work with the U.S. government on this pressing issue, there is one country that said no to that offer. And that country is none other than Venezuela. A history of non-compliance. Venezuela has had a very rocky past with the U.S. when it comes to fighting drugs. The DEA, the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, had a presence in the country for some time. It helped control the outflow of drugs from the country, and also aided in efforts to destroy the production operations going on within the Venezuelan borders. But soon enough, that changed. Hugo Chavez, the former president of Venezuela, was a strict adherent to the pillars of the Bolivarian Revolution. And one of those pillars was withdrawing the country away from U.S. influence, since the revolutionaries believed it to be an imperialistic shadow looming over their country. And so, in 2005, the DEA was kicked out of Venezuela, severing the tie that allowed the U.S. government to meddle in the country's fight against drugs. And it seems Venezuela believes it is well capable of destroying the drug and cartel problems plaguing it all on its own. Under the government of the elected president Nicolas Maduro, the successor to Hugo Chavez, the stance has remained the same. The new government also views American influence as imperialistic, refusing any offer of collaboration. Venezuela wants to maintain its sovereignty, believing any other country has no right to dictate how it fights against its domestic problems. And well, they have a point. Aside from the question of sovereignty, the U.S. interactions with the neighboring countries when it comes to drug control operations haven't exactly been damage-free. While the joint operations in Colombia did see a reduction in coca production, crippling the supply, those very same coca production operations simply shifted to neighboring countries where the U.S. couldn't touch them. Colombia was saved, but the drug problem only increased in the region. Not only that, but these operations also created another problem. While the Colombian drug cartels were quashed through raid after raid, that created a power vacuum which was quickly filled by Mexican cartels. At the same time, civilian lives were lost due to increased cartel violence, and many were displaced due to the constant bombardment of herbicides from planes above aimed at killing coca plants. But these herbicides were also destroying crops and essential green life. So, overall, nothing really changed from the U.S.-Colombia collaboration except for civilian lives being lost and the environment being affected negatively. Venezuela points to these problems, saying these are the reasons why there can be no joint operation with the U.S. to combat the thriving drug trafficking system operating out of its borders. But historically, the U.S. does not take kindly to a no, especially from a country that is way less powerful than itself, as is the case for Venezuela. Sanctions and blowback. As a response to Venezuela's lack of cooperation, the U.S. has imposed a lot of sanctions on the country and its major companies. U.S. authorities have also placed sanctions on important political figures who they believe have had a role in the spread of the drug epidemic. The hope was that because of this pressure, Venezuela would be intimidated and would open up to a collaboration. But, well, the results have been the exact opposite. For one, the Venezuelan government has adopted an even more anti-American influence stance, seeing the sanctions as an attempt to mess with the sovereignty of their country. At the same time, this has caused the country to be further pushed away diplomatically from America, instead building stronger ties with rival superpowers. China has come forth to establish a strong relationship with the South American country, providing economic support that helps mitigate the effects of the U.S. sanctions. At the same time, Russia has also become Venezuela's close ally, providing military equipment and economic support. Where Venezuela lost one powerful ally, it gained two more. Of course, this relationship goes both ways. Both China and Russia are interested in two things when it comes to Venezuela. The first is its oil resources, which are abundant both on land and in the marine territories of the country. The second thing that China and Russia are interested in is the location of Venezuela and the strategic advantage it provides. If you look up Venezuela on a map, you will notice how close it is to America. Not only that, but it holds control of a good chunk of the Caribbean Sea. And that in turn gives this small nation effective control over key maritime trade routes. It can even block off the Panama Canal, the effects of which can be devastating for America. No wonder other countries are interested in helping Venezuela. It's a strategically powerful ally to have. And that's all the more reason America cannot allow it to be a non-compliant nation. But still, does a war on drugs justify the kind of military intervention that's on the horizon? Or is there something deeper at play here? Government involvement. The narrative that the Trump administration is pushing is a rather simple one. According to Trump, Venezuela is a country that is rotten to its core, all thanks to drugs. He claims that most of the government officials are in fact involved in the drug trade themselves. They facilitate it and make a hefty sum in the process. That's the real reason why Venezuela has been against any joint action against the cartels of production farms operating within its borders. Trump has named one person to be the chief person of interest in this matter: the president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro. A former bus driver, Maduro has been Venezuela's president since 2013. By all accounts, he is a popular leader in Venezuela, having been re-elected several times now. But according to Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Maduro is the leader of the designated narco-terrorist organization Cartel de los Soles, and he is responsible for trafficking drugs into the United States. Now that is a strong accusation to make. But it seems the Trump administration is confident about its case. So much so that a $50 million bounty has been placed on the head of Maduro by the U.S. authorities, making him a wanted man by all accounts. According to the Trump administration, Venezuela has become pretty much a drug cartel-run state at this point under the leadership of Maduro. Allegedly, Maduro heads the Cartel de los Soles, and there is no denying that the drug trade is a real threat to America. Just in the year 2023, over 100,000 people died in the United States from drug overdoses. That means for every 100,000 people living in the U.S., one of them would die of an overdose. Those are some disturbing numbers. So Trump's hardline stance on the matter is very much justified. But the way he has gone about it is interesting. You see, in the past, military personnel, including the Navy, have not been involved in combating drug trafficking for the most part. Usually, it is the Coast Guard that patrols the waters and apprehends any drug traffickers. And that was because of how the drug trafficking matter was handled in the past. It was treated as a fight, sure, but not an all-out war. Trump, however, has found a way around that limitation. He has declared the cartels a narco-terrorist organization. And once the terrorist word comes into play, it's easy to deploy the military to handle it. To support this claim of the terror group, Trump has cited the data on drug overdoses. And based on that, he has been making quite a lot of trouble for Venezuela. An escalating war. We have talked about the U.S. Navy camping near Venezuelan waters, but that is not the only force that America has set forth. Trump is currently trying his best to intimidate Venezuela, and one way he is managing to do so is by flying bombers and fighter jets awfully close to Venezuelan airspace. B-52 bombers are being flown brazenly to showcase the American military might. These bombers can drop bombs on land-based targets for quite some distance away. So even if they are not flying directly into the Venezuelan airspace, their close-by presence puts land-based targets within reach for the U.S. Accompanying the B-52s are the B-1 bombers. These beasts are capable of dropping 37 tons of ordnance on the target, making them the perfect beast of warfare. But that's the thing. These bomber jets are for war. They are pretty much useless when it comes to fighting drugs. You don't blow up a city block to root out a cartel, so why are these things here? The answer: pure intimidation. While Trump is hiding behind the war against drugs excuse, that doesn't mean he is sincere about it, and the presence of these aircraft carriers and bomber jets is proof of that. These weapons of war are a clear statement. Agree to our demands or else. Just take the Gerald Ford Carrier Strike Group, for example. It comes with more than 75 fighter jets, helicopters, and early warning aircraft alongside 3 missile destroyers with the capability of attacking land-based targets. Certainly not the kind of equipment you need to fight a cartel. Now, while all this does seem like overkill, you cannot say it isn't effective because these warships haven't been sitting idly by. They are being put to good use. The deadly strikes. Ever since the U.S. started monitoring the Venezuelan waters for drug-related activity using its Navy, there have been at least 10 reported strikes conducted against smuggling boats. And no, these were not the kind of strikes where the criminal gets captured. The Navy ships identify the smuggler's boat using radar or by sight. Then, once it has been confirmed that it is indeed a drug trafficking vessel, they just blow it up. No questions asked, no demands for surrender. The results have been good or bad, depending on whom you ask. According to Trump, this is a justified approach to the situation. As he himself said, "I think we're just going to kill people that are bringing drugs into our country, okay? We're going to kill them. You know, they're going to be like dead." But the question is, are they really targeting just drug smuggling vessels, or could a mistake have been made here and there? Well, there have been claims that the U.S. Navy has been targeting fishing vessels by mistake. The wife of one of the victims has stated that her husband, Alejandro Carranza, was only out to fish in the open waters. He had no links to any drug cartel. Now, the validity of these claims, of course, cannot be verified without a proper investigation. But before any of that can come to pass, we must address the new threats that the U.S. has been making, which could result in the loss of far more lives than just 30. Trump has made several statements that indicate an escalation in the situation in the near future. First of all, He has authorized covert operations by the CIA in Venezuela. That is a huge step since it will further erode the relationship between the two countries. More importantly, though, Trump has threatened that he is seriously considering conducting land strikes in Venezuela to eliminate what he has described as production facilities for the drugs. And while the Navy has been able to conduct strikes against suspected drug cartel boats without any significant pushback, Trump will need to get Congress's approval if he really wants to go through with the land strikes. At the same time, Trump is denying that he is going to ask for a declaration of war. Rather, authorized strikes against predetermined targets. This is all some serious bad news for Venezuela, but still the government officials are putting on a brave face despite facing some tough odds against the U.S. But let's step back a bit. How many of Trump's claims are actually true? Concealed truth. Trump is calling Venezuela a major hub for production and distribution. But is that really the case? Sure, most South American countries do produce coca and the derivative drugs, but when you look at the United States Drug Enforcement Administration's National Drug Threat Assessment from 2024, it doesn't even mention Venezuela. So, according to official sources, Venezuela isn't even a major player in the drug trade. But Trump is saying it is? Not only that, but let's take a closer look at the cartel that the Venezuelan president is allegedly heading. Most experts have already debunked the theory that a cartel called Cartel de los Soles even exists, let alone having ties to the Venezuelan president. A classified National Intelligence Council report clearly states that Maduro, the president of Venezuela, does not in fact control any criminal organization. The only major cartel active in Venezuela is the Tren de Aragua. And that cartel isn't even as big a deal as the feared Colombian and Mexican cartels that move most of the drugs into the U.S. And here's the kicker. Now that isn't to say that Venezuela doesn't have any drugs passing through its borders. Sure, there may be some routes being used by cartels that do cross those borders, but when it comes to fighting where it matters, Venezuela isn't it. The amount of drugs being passed through the country pales in comparison to other South American countries that actually produce the drugs. So if the real reason behind the deployment of the Navy warships was to fight against drug cartels, Venezuela isn't even in the top 5 countries that should have been targeted. So that brings up the question, what is going on really? Why is Trump sending American troops ready to fight a war in Venezuela? Well, according to Maduro, he knows why. Changing crowns. According to Maduro, the U.S. is after something quite different from drugs. Rather, what the superpower is looking for is regime change. As Trump has stated, we have no drug cooperation with the regime in Venezuela, primarily because they're not legitimate and because they're part of it. They're part of the drug operation. Trump has ardently claimed that the Venezuelan regime is fraudulent, that they got into power through illegal means. But here is the thing. The Trump administration hasn't provided any evidence to back up the second Trump claim of Maduro being a drug cartel leader. Yet the accusations are flying non-stop, each one targeted at the president. While Trump has verbally said he is not looking to change Venezuela's regime, there are statements that make it hard to believe, like this one from a Republican senator. I think President Trump's made a decision that Maduro, the leader of Venezuela, is an indicted drug trafficker, that it's time for him to go, that Venezuela and Colombia have been safe havens for narco-terrorists for too long, and even if we ignore that, every other action of the U.S. government is pointing directly towards regime change. The deployment of the Navy, the threats of strikes, the bounty for Maduro's head, all that would only have been done if the U.S. was planning a forced regime change. And it's not like this possibility is just a conspiracy theory. Most experts agree that this could be one of the aims of the deployment of the Navy, not to mention the response from Maduro. He has stated clearly that he believes the U.S. is in the middle of manufacturing a war. But for what? The answer lies in the resources that Venezuela has. It has rich oil reserves and precious minerals that are relatively untapped. And the U.S. sure does love its oil. When the U.S. wants something, it takes it. Take Panama, for example, where the U.S. invaded a sovereign country to exert its influence over the key crossing point. According to Maduro, though, his claims are more than theory. According to him, Venezuela reports that it has captured a mercenary group with direct information from the U.S. intelligence agency, CIA, being able to determine that a false flag attack is underway from waters bordering Trinidad and Tobago or from Trinidad or Venezuelan territory itself. If this claim is true, then Maduro is in deep danger. A false flag mission could give the U.S. a clear way to a land invasion of Venezuela. And when you look at the military might disparity between the two countries, it becomes clear that the U.S. will easily come out on top. It would barely even be a war, more like a hostile takeover that would likely leave behind a regime more willing to cooperate with the U.S. But then again, in the modern world, wars are often less about bullets and more about the narrative. There is still debate over which country is on the right. Is America simply trying to rid itself of the drug epidemic, or is it trying to take over a resource-rich country? Let me know what you think is the case here in the comments down below. I would love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.